to the Fantasy Football League podcast for ONTV. I'm Joey Tysick, and across from me is Joe Johnson, as always. And week 3 is in the books, already moving on to week 4. And it just seems like the NFL season is churning away already. But I think finally, I feel like we're into kind of the groove of everything. You're starting to feel out how your players are going, starting to see some trends now rather than just, one game sample sizes. We have 3 games to go off of. How are you feeling about your team so far now that we're kind of into it?
Well, not only was my team the highest scoring team in the ONTV League, I am the last remaining undefeated team. So I am riding high. I'm excited. I laugh at the terrible grade I got on draft day, and I'm not saying I'm running away with it yet, but I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah, so far it's looked pretty good for you. I am starting to feel it's hard because I'm 2-1. I'm also pretty high up there in points and things, but my team's starting to get beat up a little bit. Devontae Smith went out with a concussion. So who knows? He might miss a game. T. Higgins came back, so I can replace him with that. But there's just a lot of weird things going on with my team at the moment. So I kind of got to figure things out. But overall, I feel like the games are getting better. I don't know if you feel that way, but
they are. And this goes back to what you and I talked about the Stars sitting out the preseason, that in week 1, these guys are getting their first real taste of action, and we're not going to see great performances in week 1, even week 2. But now it seems like certain teams, certain players are hitting their stride.
Yeah.
Perfect example is somebody like Amari Cooper, who came out of the gate with 2 terrible, terrible performances, and then all of a sudden had a 2-touchdown game.
Yeah.
So the Stars are starting to find their footing. The other thing with you mentioning T. Higgins is I got back Ferguson, tight end from Dallas. And so people that were injured earlier in the season are now starting to return to the field. And I saw somebody post on social media that the Dallas tight end was the only guy in the field trying, which I thought was funny. But he did give me a good game. I have him in 2 leagues. And I was really excited about the return of Jake Ferguson.
Yeah, and that goes along. That's the one trend that has been staying put. Tight ends are horrible. They're still just not producing anything.
Probably the worst season in recent memory for tight ends.
Which, I keep saying it, but it's wild because going into this season, we had multiple times where we were saying the tight end position is as deep as it's ever been.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we jinxed it or what happened, but tight ends are just not producing in fantasy. They're not really doing anything on the field even. Like sometimes, a tight end can look good and play good and just not produce fantasy-wise, but they're just not doing anything. It's like teams aren't utilizing their tight ends. There's been some that are hurt. Sam Laporta just got hurt in this last game.
And he just didn't look good in general.
Yeah, Trey McBride had a concussion. George Kittle sat out. So it's all over the place. And we'll probably talk about it more when we get into some of the matchups, but it's sad to see because I was really excited about tight ends for once.
You started Andrews in this league too, and
yeah, I have him in all 3 leagues.
I don't know. Do you push the panic button on Andrews? What's going on here? A 0.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning because the Ravens were blowing the Cowboys out this week, so they really didn't like. Lamar Jackson threw 15 passes. That's the lowest he's ever thrown in his career.
Wow.
So for one part, like, okay, that makes sense. They didn't throw it a lot. There's a chance that they spread the ball out too much. So Andrews getting 1 target, 0 catches isn't a huge surprise in that type of game. But I am at a crossroads now with this, like I said, having him in all 3 leagues. The talent is still there.
Yeah.
And they have who are they playing? Oh, the Bills on Sunday night this week. And the Bills have looked unstoppable.
Yeah, so at the very least, the Ravens are going to be passing. They're
Right.
going to be in come-from-behind mode.
Most likely coming from behind. Now, the Ravens do play better when they're in tough matchups. They played good against the Chiefs, came up short, played really good against Dallas, almost blew it, though. But Lamar Jackson seems to step up in these kind of playoff atmosphere games.
Yeah.
But even still, if they're down, they should be throwing more. So do I really want to want this week to be the week that I bench Mark Andrews, or
Right.
do I try to move on? And then, like, who am I moving on from? Because we just said the tight end position is so bad right now.
Right.
If I move on to somebody else, is it really going to yield that many more points than if I just stick with Mark Andrews?
Yeah, and the thing is, because of the production of tight ends, even if you get, say, single digits from your tight end, everybody's getting single digits from their tight end. There's only a couple producing. And unfortunately, one of the tight ends that has been producing is the Cardinals tight end McBride, and now he's listed as questionable.
Mm-hmm.
He came up lame during a play this past weekend. So you're not necessarily at a disadvantage if you have a tight end that's not producing, because that's usually the case across the board.
Yeah, and it's one of those cases, too, where, like, the talent is just too good. If you have guys like Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Sam Laporta, if he's back on the field, you just kind of have to play him and roll with the punches, because you know that potentially they could have a really good game. But right now, it's not looking great. So I think I have to stick with Andrews, but I am kind of at my crossroad of, like, if he doesn't produce enough this week, I probably move on.
You need to look elsewhere.
Yeah. And I don't know where that's going to be. So it's going to be real spooky.
I might get back on my eliminate the mandatory tight end soapbox.
Yeah, we might allow it. So, like we said, going to the matchups, Joe, you were the highest scorer of the week. Man. 157 points.
That's one of my best performances ever, I think, in the ONTV League.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate Becky just kind of had a bad week. She had been playing really good, or her team had been playing pretty good going into this game. But like we said, she's got 3 Arizona Cardinals, and if they struggle in a matchup, it's going to be hard to produce points, because James Conner got stuffed by the Lions defense. Trey McBride, like we said, went out, I believe, with a concussion. So he struggled a little bit. Marvin Harrison did pretty good, but even that, him getting the touchdown kind of saved his day. Otherwise, he would have only had, 11 points. So kind of tough sledding for Becky. And then Seattle's always a toss-up too. Like, Jackson Smith-Njigba got 12 targets, I believe, last week. And then this week he only had 5 or 6 and only had 3 catches. So it's kind of a wild card there. Brandon Aubrey, though, we talked about this off the show. He's the most consistent kicker I've ever seen.
I was listening to commentary on one of the games where they said that 50-plus yard field goals this year are like chip shots to kickers, that everyone is making these 50-yard field goals. And if you're in a league that have bonuses for distance, every week your kicker is leading your squad.
Yeah, and that's something that I almost want to bring up, and maybe we have to talk about it because it's a long debate outside the podcast. But in our big money league, kickers get so many bonus points, and you get a bonus after 45 yards.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think maybe we should move that up to 50 yards before they get a bonus.
Yeah, only give bonuses for 50-plus yard field goals.
Because not that it happens often, but this year especially, like, kickers are winning matchups.
They are.
And part of that in the past has been fun because it's every once in a while a kicker will do it. But right now, week in and week out, we are seeing a kicker be one of the highest scoring players in the league.
You know what's funny? This is what we've come to. So last week, Fairbairn, Houston kicker, had a monster game.
Mm-hmm.
And this week, they cut to the game where he's lining up for a field goal, and he missed it.
Yeah.
And my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, he led pretty much the league last week, and he missed one. So you really, as soon as you change the rules to try and, tamp down the excessive scoring, then you have a guy that misses a kick. So you don't know what you're getting with kickers. Right. Aubrey has been consistent, but other kickers have been up and down.
Yeah, and it's something I mentioned, too, that, normally, like last year, Aubrey had those big blow-up matchups where he would go crazy and have all these 50-plus yard field goals. But Dallas's offense was so good last year that they would score a lot, too. So he ended up getting a lot of just extra points in a lot of games.
Yeah.
Whereas this year, Dallas's offense is struggling heavily, but they're getting close enough for him to kick field goals, and that's why he's playing so well. So if the Cowboys' offense kind of steps it up, I'm sure he'll kind of come back down to normal averages.
Yeah.
But it's wild so far to see what he's done.
Yeah.
On your side of the team, on your side of the matchup, how you feeling about your team?
Well,
Because obviously they're rolling right now.
Kyron Williams was such a pleasant surprise because I saw experts kind of knocking him this week, like prior to his game, saying he's not producing. He's not the powerhouse back, and then maybe you should pick up his backup or whatever. And all of a sudden he comes out with a 3-touchdown performance, scores 31 points, and basically gave me my win.
And against San Francisco, that was a surprise.
Yeah, so that was a very pleasant surprise to get that kind of performance from Kyron Williams. Purdy had a monster game against the Rams. I was kind of expecting a game like this, but I thought it was Ayuk who was going to have those touchdown receptions. Turns out it was Jennings, Juwan Jennings. But I had Purdy and a quarterback who got 3 nice touchdowns to Juwan Jennings.
Yeah.
And so I got 25 points from Purdy. And, just like last season, I rode Purdy pretty much all season. And I don't know. Unless they did announce that he has a lower back injury. He's questionable right now.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that's just sort of, protocol where all players have to report any minor aches and pains they have. I sure hope that it doesn't affect him this week because Purdy, I think, is my guy. What a great weekend against the Rams, even though they lost. But what an exciting game that was. That was a lot of fun. That's what makes me love football is games like that.
Yeah, and I don't really like either of those teams, but to see the San Francisco 49ers lose to a very, very, very diminished Rams team was pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
Even though, the 49ers are missing all their star players as well, but I just feel like the 49ers have a higher baseline than the Rams in general.
And don't write Stafford off, man. Becky, last week, Becky's like, I can't believe you drafted Stafford. I hate Stafford. Come on, he was a Lion. You got to love Stafford. And he had a heroic performance on Sunday. It was a lot of fun. How about Chris Godwin? Correct me if I'm wrong, 3 weeks, 3 touchdowns. He is producing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yep, you're right. 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, and he's he helped me win my championship several years ago. You know what's interesting? This was in a different league when I won the championship, but I created a little display in my kitchen where I have the football cards from all the members of my team that won me my championship. Mm-hmm. And really, Godwin is the only one that was on that squad that is either an active player or healthy, and he's still producing. He is still a beast, and they say by putting him in the slot, that has rejuvenated him, and he's looking great.
And that was the thing that I had told you that in the preseason, I was like, I'm going to try to get Godwin. Did I get him? No, I got him in none of my leagues. Take my own advice. But yeah, as soon as everybody heard that he was moving back to the slot, and it seemed like Baker Mayfield was getting more of a connection with him, I was backing on Godwin because we saw Evans last year just blow up, but they didn't have that other guy to get them going. And they're like, well, why is Baker not targeting Godwin enough? Like, they had Rashad White kind of break out last year. Mm-hmm. Mike Evans was doing his thing, and they're like, we need one more guy. And for some reason, the connection with Mayfield and Godwin, or the play calling and Godwin, just wasn't working out. Now that they got him going again, they're playing pretty good. Now, they did lose to the Broncos pretty ugly this week. But
yeah, that was a shocker.
But the connection is there, and Godwin has been great for fantasy.
Yeah. Breece Hall got me out to an early lead. He played on Thursday, got me 18 points.
Now, I want to ask you about Breece Hall because similar to Kyron Williams, but maybe more of an immediate impact, are you a little concerned about Breece Hall? Because people are starting to get nervous because Braylon Allen is getting a lot of touches. He's getting some touchdowns here and there. Where do you feel about Breece Hall right now? Like, are you concerned about Braylon Allen? You're not concerned?
I'm not, because pretty much any decent team in the NFL has that 1-2 punch of running backs where, you let a guy play a series and then the other guy comes and plays a series. It keeps him fresh. Now, do I get frustrated when Allen scores 2 touchdowns that should have been Breece's? Yeah, that's frustrating. But what they are doing is no different than what every other team in the league is doing, and they're both able to stay fresh longer by complementing each other. Mm-hmm. And when I got home, because I think I got home at like halftime of that game, I had missed his touchdown and everything. And what I witnessed on the field wasn't all that impressive. But then all of a sudden I look at his score, and he finished with 18 points.
Yeah.
I'll take 18 points any day from my running back. So,
Right.
no, he's a plug-and-play guy. He's a guy I'm just going to leave in my lineup week after week until his bye week rolls around. Now, I got to say, one of my most pleasant surprises, and people might find this shocking to hear me describe this guy as a pleasant surprise, but Diggs.
Mm-hmm.
I am so happy that I picked up Diggs late in the draft when everyone, I guess, thought he was done. He gave me another 19-point game.
Yeah.
And I don't think he scored a touchdown.
Nope.
I think that was purely on volume.
Yeah, he had
catches and yards.
He had 10 catches for 94 yards.
Come on.
And he also threw a pass for 13 yards.
I'm very, very happy with Diggs. And every time I'm on the fence, like if I'm thinking about putting someone else in my starting lineup, I'll look at that flex spot that I have Diggs in, and I'm like, no, I'm leaving him in there till further notice.
And see, this is one of those trends that I was talking about. In the early part of the season, I said I was staying away from the Texans, which I did listen to my own advice this time. Didn't get any Texans throughout any of my drafts. We're starting to find out it's Nico Collins, it's Stephon Diggs. Tank Dell has been the odd man out in that Houston offense. They play a lot of 2 wide receiver sets, and Tank Dell is usually not there. In 3 wide receiver sets, he is. But Diggs is the slot guy this year for them, and he's kind of, in this game at least, when they were behind the Vikings, he was kind of the safety valve for C.J. Stroud when Minnesota was really trying to stop Nico Collins. So if that continues, then Stephon Diggs might have another really solid year.
Well, this game in particular, because some people are describing it as a revenge game because the Vikings were his former team.
Yeah.
And so I think he had something to prove, and that was a great performance by him.
Yeah. The one last thing that I do want to mention, similar to the Breece Hall statement, and you've mentioned it a couple times, David Montgomery right now is outproducing Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yes.
He has more fantasy points than Jahmyr Gibbs, and it's not by much. But right now, he is outproducing him, and he was 6 rounds later than Jahmyr Gibbs' draft pick.
I said that on draft day. Like, why has Montgomery fallen so far in the draft? And he not only is he producing, he looks like he's having a blast out there. And, and even though, Gibbs benefited from that hook and ladder touchdown, which was awesome, but both of those running backs look like they're having a blast. And that's a perfect example of what I was just talking about.
Right.
Is they complement each other so well. They're spelling each other so that one can get a rest while the other one plays, and you see the results on the field.
Makes me even more mad about the auction league not being able to get him again.
Yeah.
I can't believe he only went for $10 in that league. I thought for sure, being a homer, that he was going to go for more. So I paid up earlier and ran out of money. That's one of my biggest frustrations of the season. But so good week for you, and you still have Deebo Samuel on the bench and Pacheco, who are hurt. So it's kind of scary, I'll be honest.
Yeah, because eventually I'm going to get those guys back. As a matter of fact, I think Deebo was upgraded recently, so he's getting closer and closer to coming back. So
obviously Pacheco, it's going to be a long time. Honestly, there's a chance he could miss the whole season.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised. But when Deebo comes back, you'll be able to replace Ayuk pretty easily, and your team's going to look quite scary.
I think in the 3 leagues that I'm in, I'm pretty sure Ayuk was the first, if not one of the first wide receivers I drafted. And I have to say, so far, he's been a huge disappointment. And imagine how San Francisco feels giving him that huge contract, and he's not putting up the numbers. And for Jennings to score 3 touchdowns and 150 yards receiving, Ayuk's the guy who just got the big contract. Why is he not putting up those numbers? We'll see if someone lights a fire under this guy.
Yeah, and it's not a game that I watched back, so I'm not sure. The Rams could have been really trying to stop Ayuk, and that's why Jennings was, open more often or able to get more catches. But there was a lot of plays where Jennings just made a great play on the ball. So kind of hard to say. I think there was one. Was there one touchdown that Ayuk dropped or something like that?
Well, there was a holding call on the Rams, and Ayuk was
Yeah.
He had 5 steps on the defender, and had he not been held, that would have been like an 80-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
And they called holding, and if it wasn't pass interference, it would have been a spot foul. But had he not been held, he would have started the game with like an 80-yard touchdown. And it's just those little things, that will affect a guy's game. But he could have had a much bigger game if it wasn't for like these little things.
Right. The next highest score of the week, Tracy's team, 155 points. They are starting to get going, I would say. And on the opposite side, Sammy is struggling still. I believe he's the only 0-3 team now. And
he just cleaned house.
Mm-hmm.
He got rid of a bunch of guys, picked up a bunch of guys, and still falls 54 points short against Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to throw his hands up in the air and go, what do I need to do?
Yeah, and I feel bad. I kind of threw the bomb on him yesterday talking to him that I guess he didn't hear and I it's also my fault. I will admit I did not have the settings changed to what we agreed upon of the 6 playoff teams. So he was still in thought that everybody made the playoffs. So I had to tell him yesterday that he is in danger of missing the playoffs.
Oh, no.
So I apologize, Sammy. But I will say there's still plenty of time left on the season, but it is getting a little bit nervy at 0-3. But because there's so many other people at 1-2 and 2-1, there's plenty of room.
Not out of it by any means,
yeah.
But you do have to start making changes. And, we talk about this every week. You need to start thinking trades.
Yeah.
Who do you have that might benefit someone else's team that has a player that might benefit your team?
Yeah. And again, I'll say, like, he had a tough week just in general. C.J. Stroud struggled against Minnesota. Apparently, Minnesota's defense is really good. Like I said, Tank Dell has gotten the short end of the stick for Houston's offense. Rashid Shaheed put up a 0, big old donut, after he had been playing really good the first 2 weeks. And then Achane.
That was shocking. That was absolutely shocking. Yeah. And someone had told me in the DK, the fantasy DraftKings pools, that something like 50-something% of lineups had Shaheed in their lineup.
Yeah.
How does a Saint, especially after last week, how does a Saint come up with a big old goose egg?
Yeah.
A lot of games were lost, I think, on Shaheed not producing.
Yeah. Achane struggling again with the Dolphins. We talked about it before that the Dolphins might be in trouble because of Tua being out.
Situation. Yeah.
So I don't know what they're gonna do. Their offense everybody might struggle on that team for a while. So that's a bit of a concern. The other surprising one, Josh Jacobs, really struggled in this game, even though Green Bay won fairly easily.
Well, give credit to their defense on that one.
True.
But yeah, Jacobs is not the same player he was with the Raiders when wasn't he the rushing leader, two seasons ago?
Well, even last week, he didn't have that many points, but he put up 151 yards on the ground last week on 32 carries because Jordan Love being out. And Jordan Love was out in this game, but he just didn't get the volume for some reason. And I don't know. So I would not be too concerned about that, but it's just something to look out for. Jordan Mason finally came up short, not getting a touchdown for once, so he only got 10 points. That's a problem with Jordan Mason. Obviously, he's nowhere near Christian McCaffrey, but McCaffrey gives you those points of catching the ball every once in a while. Jordan Mason, the 2 catches that he got in this game were a surprise, even. So for him to produce like he had been, he has to get in the end zone, and that's just something it's hard to replicate week in and week out. And again, A.J. Brown is on the bench for Sammy because he's hurt.
Yeah.
So still not sure when he's going to come back. Dallas Goedert had a huge game, but nobody really expected it. It was once Devontae Smith went out with the concussion that Goedert had a huge game.
Yeah, we were talking tight ends earlier, and you can't blame Sammy for having Kincaid in the lineup. Kincaid got a touchdown, right? But Goedert was a little on my radar this week because last week him and there was another wide receiver, Colvin or something like that. I'm trying to remember what
Covey.
Covey.
Yep.
those two guys combined for a lot of catches. They were just inhaling everything that was their way. And I remember, I'm looking at Goddard going, is he available? And obviously he's not going to be available.
Yeah.
But when you have Kincaid and Goddard on your lineup, and I don't blame him for starting Kincaid, but my goodness, Goddard, if you see that slow motion replay of one of the catches that he had, it was like an Odell Beckham one-handed catch that he somehow grabbed out of the air, man. He looked so impressive. Yeah. So, when we talk about trades and trying to better your team, Sammy has Kincaid and Goddard. You got to trade one of those guys away if that means you can improve your team in a different area.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say, too, second week in a row, Sammy sat James Cook and paid for it. Sammy, if you're out there.
18 points on the bench.
If you're out there and you want a wide receiver, I have plenty of wide receivers that I will trade you for James Cook.
Yeah.
Potentially, I'd probably trade you Devontae Adams for James Cook right now.
And the fact that we have 2 flex spots, I don't understand the logic of having Cook on your bench.
Yeah. Again, I know he has so many good running backs, but Cook's just played so well. I think he would probably play for me over Jordan Mason just because James Cook gets those catches. But let's get to the primetime 155 points put up by Tracy.
I'm glad we didn't face each other this week. Imagine 157 against 155. That would have been a nail biter.
Yeah. Joe Burrow, he had a good game. The Bengals didn't really because they lost to Washington, which is crazy.
And you have to – a lot of Burrow's production came on those last 2 drives when they were behind and he was just – chucking it, and it looked like near the end of the game the Commanders were getting Gatorade on the sideline or something because Burrow just that second to the last drive just marched down the field and scored at will.
Yeah.
So a lot of those points came in the desperation drives at the end.
Right.
So it wasn't his best outing, but he gave you 25 points, so that's good.
But Tracy right now has 3 elite wide receivers. She has Rashee Rice, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson all having big games. Rice having 12 catches, 110 yards, and a touchdown. Chase having 2 touchdowns and 118 yards. Jefferson getting 81 yards, 6 catches, and a touchdown. That was all in the first half. And then he had kind of gone away because they were blowing out the Texans. But
so she sends us a message, through the Yahoo chat there. And she's like, Joe, we're facing each other next week. So I went to look at her lineup, and I went, oh, no.
Yeah.
Her roster looks terrifying. I almost said terrible. Terrifying.
Yeah.
And she was like, really? You think it looks? Yes.
Yeah.
And you factor in Kamara, who could have a monster game at a moment's notice.
Right.
Her team is terrifying. It really is.
And then, again, she has Sam Laporta, who's been struggling. So if Sam Laporta ever gets going, that's crazy to think about. Like I said, Baltimore might be trailing in this game coming up, so Zay Flowers might have a good week. Dak Prescott is on her bench. Joe Mixon is hurt. Chris Olave finally had a good game. Brian Robinson's been playing. She has a deep team as well. So,
and her defense showed up to play. New York was pretty highly rated on draft day. When you look at the cheat sheets, it was up near the top as the defense to draft. And she took a chance on them, and they put up 16 points, and they looked really, really good against New England.
Yeah, so that'll be a fun matchup coming up with you and Tracy taking each other on. So that'll be cool to see.
Dare I say game of the week next week?
I think for sure. I haven't even looked at the next week's matchups, but I can't imagine there being anything better.
That's going to be fun.
Kind of the surprise of the week. Kelsey later finally getting on the win column, putting up 147 points, beating Ian's team, who only scored 111. And again, Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey for Marie didn't do anything. And she still put up 147 points.
Something's up with Kelsey. People noticed, on the sideline, he looked kind of lethargic. I think everything's good in Taylor Swiftville because she was in the press box cheering him on. Yeah. But something's up. Something's not right with Kelsey. Yeah. I don't know if he's hurt or what.
A lot of the thought process that I've been seeing that people have been talking about Kelsey, it's almost the opposite of Stephon Diggs and Chris Godwin. Normally, the Chiefs have relied on Travis Kelce to be the over-the-middle option and just pepper him with targets. And they usually have one outside guy. Well, last year, Rashee Rice was that outside guy. This year, they have Xavier Worthy, who, although he doesn't get a ton of catches, Xavier Worthy is always stretching the field by he runs a lot of go routes, but it makes defenses have to account for it because you can't let Xavier Worthy get over the top because he's so fast. Well, what they're doing is they're putting Rashee Rice in that slot role, and he's going over the middle a lot.
Yeah.
And so when you have Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce going over the middle for short yardage, teams are going to rely or focus a little bit. It's easier to focus on Travis Kelce, whereas Rashee Rice, he's younger, he's faster, he gets away, gets separation. So Mahomes is checking it down to him rather than Travis Kelce.
It's funny you mention that because I remember one play in particular. You know how Collinsworth just loves his Mahomes.
Yeah.
He praises Mahomes when he throws it out of bounds deliberately. But there was one moment where Rice kind of did this. I don't know the correct name for the route, but he camped out where Kelce normally would camp out. Like he ran to the middle, stopped, squared up to Mahomes, who hit him right in the numbers, and Collinsworth was like, that's what Kelce usually does. He's doing a Kelce out there. So you're absolutely right that with Rice playing so well, he may be just taking away opportunities from Kelce.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to watch. And that's one of those trends that we're starting to see might be the case. And that's why Rice is having such a good season so far. The other thing, the crazy thing is Marie's top picks, Patrick Mahomes, CeeDee Lamb, Travis Kelce, they were her worst players of the week.
Yeah.
And she had a big blow-up game. DK Metcalf has been insane so far. I will say the one concerning thing about Metcalf is he only had 4 catches. He's been getting really big touchdown plays.
Yeah.
Hard to rely on that, but he's just looked so good this year.
He does that year after year after year.
Yeah.
Metcalf is the deep guy. You just put it up and it falls in his hands.
Yeah, so he's been really good this year. Derrick Henry had a huge game when we see Baltimore ahead.
He looks so good out there, man.
They love running.
Fast.
They love running when ahead, so this game script was perfect. 151 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, 30 points. Najee Harris got 5 catches, which is a big surprise. Actually helped him out in that week to get 13 points, which is pretty good for him, honestly. And we finally saw the return of Amari Cooper. 7 catches, 2 touchdowns.
So in another league, after the first 2 weeks of seeing Cleveland, I was done with Cleveland. I'm like, they just look awful. And I flat out dropped Amari Cooper, which I'm sure will haunt me because, of course, the week that I drop him, now he's still a free agent in the other league, but Kelce later drafted Cooper, right?
Yeah.
And this was his first big game this season, 27 points. We'll see. We'll see because Cleveland just does not look good, and people are starting to call for the backup quarterback to come in. But, yeah, Cooper looked great, 2 touchdowns. He looked like his old self.
Yeah. So, again, Marie had a really good week. Ian's team, kind of the same deal. Like, he's just been having quarterback issues. Justin Herbert getting hurt in this game again.
Yeah.
So he wasn't able to do a whole lot.
Even if he would have put Richardson in.
Richardson's been really bad.
He's on a downward slide.
Yeah.
Something's not right there.
Yeah, he he's still kind of basically a rookie because he got hurt so early in the year last year.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like he's getting his rookie mistakes out, but he also looked so good at the beginning of last year when he did play. So
yeah.
And we saw a glimpse of it in the first game of this year?
Yeah,
he looked really good.
Pierce for what, 2 touchdowns and
and he had a rushing touchdown.
And Pittman's starting to come on too. So he's got people to throw to. Let's see if he pulls it together.
Yeah, he's just been turning the ball over. Had some really bad, weird looking passes. So hard to say. And then Ian still got Ken Walker on the mend as well.
Yeah.
St. Brown finally getting going.
How do you lose when Barkley gives you 33 points, man?
Tough.
That's tough. He had another monster game.
I think he continues to be the surprise of the year for me.
Which could be RB1 at the end of the season. He looks so solid. You know, we all knew that Philly has a great O-line, even with the loss of the other Kelsey.
Yeah.
But Barkley is really taking advantage
Yeah.
of that O-line.
It makes you feel silly because you thought, well, Barkley hasn't had, he has had a really good rookie season and he's had a couple good seasons here and there. So maybe you question the health, but you're like, man, he hasn't really put it all together. So you're like, can he do it? Even though we know that he's super talented and now he goes to one of the best offensive lines in the league, gets to leave the Giants. I feel like maybe we were all a little bit overthinking things.
Yeah. I did not have him on my radar on draft day. I was not going to add him to my roster, and now I'm kicking myself.
Yeah. Jaden Reed, again, kind of struggling just because Jordan Love not playing. He almost did play in that game, so he should be back sooner. So Jaden Reed might get going. Mike Evans having a weirdly odd game, even being down the whole game, only have 2 catches for 17 yards. Not sure what happened there.
Well, it's the who's the defender that was on him?
You're right. Patrick Surtain.
Surtain is known as one of the best defenders in the league.
I wasn't thinking.
Going into that game, everyone said that he is going to be locked down on Evans. They said Godwin is going to benefit in this game because Evans is going to be covered.
Good call.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. He shut down Metcalf a couple weeks ago.
Exactly.
I totally forgot they were playing Denver.
Yeah. So, Surtain was great.
So I would say if you ever have a top receiver playing Denver, just be ready for probable struggles.
Exactly.
And then having 2 Raiders on your team was not great this week. Getting destroyed by Carolina, who finally put the red rifle in at quarterback.
Are you kidding me? The first quarterback in 2024 to have 3 touchdowns, 300 yards passing.
Hey, a quarterback change and a veteran quarterback like Andy Dalton. We've seen it from him in the past that Andy Dalton is just a quality quarterback in the league. So you give him the right weapons. We thought Carolina would be better this year because they added weapons like Deontay Johnson. But Bryce Young just couldn't figure it out. And then as soon as you throw Andy Dalton in, they start scoring. Now, they were playing the Raiders, who aren't the greatest.
Yeah, but still, I stream in another league. I streamed the Raiders defense, thinking that in the first few weeks of the season, defenses were putting up points against the Panthers, and the Raiders defense got negative points for me.
Garrett Wilson still struggling as a top pick for Ian. That's another one I would be concerned about because the Jets are Aaron Rodgers is spreading the ball around so much. Like they're playing well, but it's hard to guess which wide receiver is going to do well going into it. So I don't know if Garrett Wilson is going to turn it around or not. But I think Ian's still okay. He's got some injury woes at the moment. So we'll see going forward. The next and final matchup.
Did we cover Kelsey later squad? Did we already do that?
Yeah, Derrick Henry.
We did. Derrick Henry. Okay, good. All right, let's move on.
So I was the last winner of the week, putting up 131 points. I thought that was a pretty good week, but everybody else decided to blow up this week, I guess. So I'm glad, though, that I got to play Malik, who only had 113 points. Unfortunately, part of it was because of George Kittle. I know Malik had a really busy week, so he probably forgot to set his lineup or didn't see that George Kittle was out. So I somewhat apologize for that. But Lamar Jackson having a good week. Jamison Williams finally struggling. It looked like they definitely tried to run the ball a lot more. Before the Laporta injury, they were trying to get to Laporta more often. So it's kind of like I said, maybe Jamison Williams, as good as he is, was taking away from the offense because it was making Jared Goff throw more risky passes. So they played a lot more conservative. So he didn't have a very good game. Tyreek Hill, like I said, Dolphins, they might be struggling for a while. And then, Jacksonville last night was awful. They looked so bad. They couldn't stop anything. And then you fall behind, and Travis Etienne catches a couple passes, but they're going to go away from the run game, and that was just awful.
Yeah, as I was driving home yesterday, I heard the radio announcer say that the Bills had 5 drives, 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
Yeah. And then Malik having Rashad White, who is actually starting to lose touches to Bucky Irving. Nico Collins struggling against Minnesota. But Terry McLaurin finally having a good game. Jaden Daniels and him had a great connection. completed a big touchdown towards the end of the game.
That came out of nowhere, man.
Yeah, dropped it right in the bucket.
And you know what? I'm going to say this, and this has nothing to do with our other league, but okay, so he throws that bomb. It was a beautifully placed pass. McLaurin made a great catch for a touchdown. But was that the smartest thing to do in that situation? Because that left 2 minutes on the clock, which allowed Cincinnati to march down the field and score. I don't know if they scored on – oh, they did score on that drive.
Yeah.
What they should have done is they should have just gone for the first down. If they would have gone for the first down, they could have ended the game right there.
Yeah,
so
I'm
going for the touchdown – even though it gave them a 2-score lead, and I'm sure they said, okay, this is
it is one of those riskier things to do.
But imagine, so Cincinnati, they march down the field, they score. Then had they gotten the onside kick, now all of a sudden there's a possibility they're going to lose. And stranger things have happened in the NFL.
Right.
So even though it was a beautiful pass, beautiful catch, and padded McLaurin's numbers, it wasn't the smartest play in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah, I now that you mention it, I can't remember exactly with the timing and everything, but you might be right where it could have been better to just continue a slower drive.
Yeah,
but,
and weren't we just talking the other day about that Gurley touchdown where
lost
he
the game.
Tried not to score, but he got pushed into the end zone,
Yeah.
accidentally scored a touchdown, and they lost to the Lions because they scored a touchdown. So.
Yeah.
Now, Singletary got the memo. He had that long run and went down on the 1-yard line, which is frustrating for fantasy owners. But that's a smart thing to do on the field because now you just run out the clock.
Right. And then for me, speaking of the Bills, Josh Allen, 4 passing touchdowns, but he only scored 30 points because he didn't have to throw it that much.
Yeah.
Like they had good field position. They also ran the ball effectively. So he didn't get a lot of yardage, but he got 4 touchdowns. I'm not going to complain. 44 rushing yards. Had a huge game.
Allen looking like a league winner, and I would not be surprised if he finished QB1 on the season.
Yeah. Devontae Adams going along with that Raiders struggle. Like I said, Sammy, I'll trade him for James Cook if you want. Malik Neighbors.
Oh, what?
Man.
What a star.
He's
what
another
a superstar.
He's another one that I wanted going into drafts, and I'm so sad I only got him in this league. He's looked so good, and he's helped Daniel Jones be more comfortable.
Yeah.
Giving Daniel Jones a safety valve has seemingly made the Giants decent. I'm not going to say they're good, but decent. And Daniel Jones has actually looked pretty solid in these last 2 games because of it.
You know, they say a rising tide lifts all boats, and I think with defenders having to, deal with neighbors from here on out, I think you're going to see other Giants receivers start to step up.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of Wan'Dale Robinson. I think I have him in a couple of leagues, and I'm seeing his numbers pick up a little bit because defenders are going to focus on neighbors, which is going to benefit the other Giants receivers.
Right. My 2 stud running backs had okay games. Bijan Robinson, 13 points. Jahmyr Gibbs, 16. I mean, they got in the end zone, so
double digits, anytime you get double digits, you can't complain too loudly.
Right.
Not stellar games, but decent games, which contribute to your point total.
Yeah. And then luckily, Mark Andrews evened out the tight end matchup with George Kittle. So I can't feel too bad for Malik forgetting about George Kittle.
They both got 0.
So,
it's funny because that's what I said at the beginning of the podcast. Even if you get low production from your tight end, so did your opponent.
Yep. So, I mean, Malik didn't even play a tight end, and he got the same amount of points as my tight end. So that's pretty fun. Devontae Smith was having a great game until he got out with the concussion. That's one to always watch out for. Hopefully he'll be okay going forward. Tony Pollard was an absolute dud in this game. I don't know if it was just because of game script, but he had been playing really well, so I decided to play him. And that did not work out for me at all. Tampa Bay's defense was awful as well. I still have Cooper Kupp out. He's going to be out for a little while. T. Higgins came back, which is nice to see. If anybody somehow needs a quarterback, I have Jaden Daniels just sitting there, and he's been incredible.
You have an embarrassment of riches at the quarterback position. I will say this about Cooper Kupp. I heard somebody say, maybe it was during Fantasy Football Now yesterday, that he's not on IR, which could be a positive sign, but they said the reason he's not on IR might have more to do with the fact that they have so many injured players and there's a limit.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm going to try and be optimistic and hope that Cooper Kupp comes back sooner than later. But if he misses, say, 4 weeks, then he might as well have been on IR. So we'll see. I really hope he comes back because, Stafford looked pretty decent with the talent that he was working with this past week. And if he gets Kupp back and then later maybe Puka comes back, they're going to be a pretty solid team, but, he's just Stafford's working with what he has now.
Yeah. It's kind of funny that you look at it. Malik and I both having tight ends that put up zeros, and then we both have the injured Rams wide receivers on our bench. So a little bit of parity
mirror images.
Yeah. But so I moved to 2-1, which is great. I'll just pull up the league standings before we go into waivers really quick. Like I said, you're 3-0. Leading the league in points and everything. Tracy right behind you. She has 1 more point than I do, unfortunately. So I'm in 3rd place at 2-1. Malik finally getting a loss. He moves to 4th place. And then we have Becky, Marie, and Ian at 1 and 2 with Sammy tailing the field. But he does have 3 more points than Ian.
Wow.
So there is some hope there. Sammy by far has the most points scored against him. So that's always an unlucky feeling. So hopefully luck will turn around. Going into waivers, we've got plenty of people, as always. Plenty of quarterbacks. I don't think anybody really needs a quarterback, like I said, in this league usually.
My phone is acting up, but is Darnold still on the waiver wire? Because he's looking impressive out there, and he's throwing at Jefferson, and he's a very, very tempting pickup. I have, in all my leagues, I have 2 quarterbacks, but I'm starting to eyeball Darnold because who could have predicted that he was going to come out of the gates like this?
Yeah. And then, of course, there's Andy Dalton, who's out there, who just had a really good game. Maybe he keeps that momentum. Joe, cover your ears, but Aaron Rodgers is starting to turn things around.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it when we were talking about it, but he had a pretty good-looking game in week 3, and I hear people saying, "Oh, maybe I should pick him up," and I'm like, "No, he's my nemesis." But the Jets' offense look like they're starting to come together.
Yeah, and then as far as like other positions, Jordan Addison, he might be getting healthy now. Roma Dunze, who had a really good game for Chicago, I don't know if they're gonna be throwing the ball that much, but he's an option. We finally saw DeAndre Hopkins come out of retirement for Tennessee.
Yeah, he was looking pretty nimble on the field.
He had a crazy good play to get the touchdown, just kind of evading the tackler. Khalil Shakir had a really good game for Buffalo last night. What did he end up getting? 6 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown for 19 points. So there's plenty of good options. Running back, Sammy dropped Aaron Jones. So I'll just tell everybody, if they need a running back, Aaron Jones is out there, but I think Sammy has first priority, so
I would think
he could get Aaron Jones right back, but then again, once again, Sammy has so many running backs. Does he really want to pick them up? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. We'll have to wait and see. Is there any other guys that you can think of on the waiver wire?
Hubbard.
Hubbard
had a pretty big week this weekend. He's something that if you're shallow at running back, he might be someone to stash and keep an eye on, especially with Dalton looking pretty
making
good
that
out
offense
there.
Play a lot better. It's going to look good.
Maybe I shouldn't have said anything. Maybe I should have just threw him on my wish list.
Yeah.
But yeah, he looked pretty good. You know who else was looking pretty good this weekend until he got hurt was Eckler. Eckler was looking pretty good, and then he had like this kick return that was really impressive. And then he's going to the locker room, so I don't know what's going on there. I think they said concussion, so if he clears protocol, maybe he'll be back. But Eckler's another guy that you might want to keep an eye on.
Yeah. The 2 that I just thought of are tight ends. David Njoku might be coming back soon, so I would watch out for that. He could help Cleveland's offense a bit. And then if they make a quarterback change, he could be really good like he was last year. And then Cole Kmet had a huge game for Chicago. Again, it's hard to take into account Chicago because they threw the ball 52 times. So they had a lot of guys that blew up in this game. I don't think they're going to do that every week. But it does look like Caleb Williams is looking for Cole Kmet. So if you need a tight end, that could be another option. But yeah, as usual, if you need anybody, there's a lot of options in smaller leagues. So
Did
make
you
sure.
I was fiddling with my phone while you were talking. Did you mention Charbonnet at all?
I did not.
So,
That's a good one to bring up.
Is it Walker?
Yeah.
Yeah. Walker, I guess, is dealing with some injuries.
hmm
And Charbonnet, didn't he have a 2-touchdown game?
Yeah, he looked really good. I was actually thinking that he was going to struggle.
Yeah.
But he played really good. Miami's been terrible against the run. Yeah, he had 91 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had 3 catches. The only thing I would say, if you're gonna pick up Charbonnet, the risky part is they play Detroit this week.
Who's been tough
They've
on running backs.
And that's 2 years in a row that Detroit has just been able to stuff running backs. So if you think Ken Walker is going to be out for more than 1 week, then he comes back and Charbonnet gets the Giants the week after. The only risky part is by then Ken Walker might be back. So Charbonnet could be a good option. I would say if you have an open spot on your bench, definitely pick him up just in case Ken Walker comes back and then gets re-injured. Charbonnet is a great stash to have.
I wanted to get your opinion. The hot waiver wire pickups last weekend, there was a 50-50 consensus on Steele and Orion to replace the injured Pacheco.
Mm-hmm.
What was your take on that, watching those guys play? Obviously, Steele got more of the carries.
Yeah.
Orion seemed to be more of like a third down back or maybe a pass catching back or something. But what these guys were so hot on the waiver wire. What was your impressions?
So Steele looked really good. He got banged up at the end of the game.
He did. I saw him limp off the field. And
I think he was fine. I don't see any injury report, so it seems like he's fine. But I know he went out and he sat kind of towards the end of the game. But he had 17 carries, 72 yards, only 1 catch. I know they're probably not going to throw it to him a bunch. So that's going to be the weird part about it because Ryan's probably going to get the catches. But if you're looking for just touchdowns in a good offense, I think Carson Steele's the guy. He looked good, honestly. He's going to be similar to that Jordan Mason, where he's going to get rushing yards, he's going to get the touchdowns. But if he doesn't get a touchdown, he might have a bad game. So it's kind of what you have to rely on.
Did you follow the story that he was supposed to stand up at a wedding that night?
No.
And I guess he had committed to it, like he was in the bridal party, you know.
Wow.
And he had committed to it like a year ago, never knowing that he was going to have this opportunity. So they had the game on the big screen at the wedding reception, and everyone was gathered around and cheering him on. And I just thought that was a really cool story.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, waivers, plenty of options, like I said. If we move on and look to week 4, which to me sounds crazy to be talking about week 4 of the NFL season already. Oh, maybe there is, I said maybe there's not. You might not be you'd be the clear-cut matchup of the week. But I have to say there's a household matchup this week.
Oh, husband-wife projection is a one point difference plus a fraction.
So right now I'm taking on Marie, and her team's looking pretty good right now. Just had coming off a big week. So that'll be a fun one in the house. Like I said, I have to make some decisions. I put T. Higgins in the starting role for now, not knowing Devontae Smith's status. So if Devontae Smith is going to miss a week, I'm going to have to figure out a replacement. I don't know if I'm going to go with one of the rookie wide receivers or if I'll go with Tony Pollard again or maybe look to the waiver wire. Haven't fully decided just yet, but it's going to be contentious on Sunday.
I need to keep an eye on Purdy's condition. He's questionable. We'll see how that plays out. Not sure if I want to throw my backup Stafford in because they're facing Chicago, whose defense has been fairly formidable.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to look at that quarterback situation.
Yeah.
Will I pick up a quarterback on waivers? I'm not going to tip my hand in case Tracy is listening right now. But like I said, her team is frightening. She's favored to win right now.
Right.
So we'll see. But as far as my lineup goes, I don't see me making many changes to the lineup I have in there.
Yeah.
Do I wish I had Pacheco back? Yes. But the only position I'm going to keep an eye on is the quarterback position and see how that plays out.
Yeah, and I would think that, especially against her own Jets defense, Javonte Williams will hit the bench and probably be replaced with except she doesn't have very many running backs. Oh, Brian Robinson, though. She could put Brian Robinson in there.
True.
Joe Mixon might be back, so if Joe Mixon is healthy, he could slot back in there. So Tracy might have some difficult lineup decisions because, again, Olave just had a really good game. Does he play over Zay Flowers? I don't know.
That's where you look at the matchups, see where the defense ranks against that position.
Yeah, it's going to be tough because, like I said, Buffalo might blow out the Ravens. They might be passing a lot. And then Zay Flowers could be open a lot. I'm not sure, but should be fun. That'll be a cool matchup to see as well. Man, my computer's lagging.
Like I said, for me, Deebo Samuel has been upgraded. So if his condition improves, I don't know. Maybe he finds a spot in my starting lineup.
Yeah. Do you consider J.K. Dobbins at all? I know he had a down week, but, Jerome Ford has been on the edge of being shaky. Is there a decision there, or?
Well, in week 3, it basically came down to matchups. Dobbins, was facing a tough defense. I left him on my bench, and I'm glad I did. He had a down week in week 3. He is playing KC, right?
Yeah.
This upcoming week. He's projected to have 9, almost 10 points. Ford is projected to have 10 points, so it could be a wash, but the way the Raiders defense played this past weekend, I might leave Ford in my lineup.
That's a good point.
So again, it all comes down to matchups. So right now, things are going to kind of hold until I see how the quarterback situation plays out.
Yeah. And then Sammy, right now he's projected to beat Malik, 134 to 119. Again, we don't know about Kittle. It sounds like he's going to be back and healthy. So that'll be interesting. Sammy's got a lot of guys that are expected to get a lot of points. A.J. Brown looking like he should be on his way to being ready to go for this game. Sammy's going to have to make a lineup decision of, does he stick with Tank Dell or does he look for somebody on the waiver wire? Does he get somebody off of his bench? I'm not sure. Again, he has so many running backs. He's got to make a decision there. Again, I'll trade you for James Cook. I'll keep throwing that into the universe. So there's decisions there. And Malik, again, just kind of navigating injuries. Can Miami get going for Tyreek Hill? It's all up in the air.
It's kind of funny. In an alternate universe, C.J. Stroud should be my quarterback. Remember the little draft day glitch? I was too slow in selecting Stroud in my draft pick, and I auto-drafted Debo. And then Sammy snatched him up. And I can't help but giggle. This past weekend, he only put up, 9 points or something?
Yeah, he really struggled.
So we'll see how he does against Jacksonville. But every bad game that Stroud has throughout the rest of the season, I'm going to be giggling on the couch.
Yeah. And then the final matchup, Becky is taking on Ian. Again, Ian's got to figure out this quarterback situation. But he's got Barkley going against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is usually a good run defense, but they're missing some of their interior guys. Garrett Wilson, there's the matchup, going against Denver, most likely Pat Surtain. So Garrett Wilson might get stymied. And Amon-Ra St. Brown on Monday night will be awesome to watch. Becky's going to have David Montgomery in that game, which is going to be cool. And she also has Jackson Smith and Jigba on the other side of it. So their matchup is going to come down possibly to Monday Night Football, which is always fun. Maybe not fun for everybody.
There's a player we haven't really talked about today, and this comes into this matchup next week. Hurts.
Yeah.
Her quarterback Hurts. He had a down week this week. So far throughout the season, he hasn't looked all that impressive.
He's had a lot of turnovers. A lot of turnovers. That's his problem.
So I don't know. Is there a quarterback dilemma? She does not have a backup quarterback.
She has Jordan Love.
Oh, yeah.
And he might be back, but he's coming off an injury, so that's a little bit spooky.
And he's facing Minnesota, who's been playing really, really well.
Right.
So, I don't know. Hurts against Tampa Bay. They gave up some points this past weekend. So
Yeah.
maybe you ride Hurts one more week, but you got to, if he has another down game.
I'll say in my big league, I have Jalen Hurts, and I am right now benching him for Jaden Daniels.
Interesting.
He showed me enough last night. I like that Jaden Daniels doesn't turn the ball over. Now, I understand the risk that Jalen Hurts could have a monster game, but right now with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown coming off of injuries, I think I would just rather go for the safe play, and maybe that's, getting too cute already, but I think that's what I'm going to do. But I think if you don't have a good enough backup option, I would just stick with Hurts because obviously he's very talented. He's struggling with turnovers at the moment. So
Looks like Harrison Jr. has a nice matchup too. Seeing what
yeah,
Burrow did against Washington last night and just easily moving down the field, it's looking like Harrison Jr. could have another big week. So this is going to be a fun matchup to keep an eye on next week.
yeah. So that could be a good one all around. But yeah, week 3 is in the books, and we're moving on to week 4. So if you're sitting in a tough spot with all these weird quarterback changes with Miami, or you're sitting at 0-3 like Sammy, this is the time where you start looking at trades because, like I said, we're starting to see trends of players. So we're starting to get a little bit of an idea of how these players are going to progress throughout the season. Now, it's not everything, but this is where you start to try to figure out what your team needs, what they don't, make the waiver wire adjustments, make possibly some trades if you need it. And we're getting into the heart of the season. And after this week, we're getting into bye weeks in week 5. And that's where the craziness begins.
That's where depth comes into play. And
yeah.
You know what I was thinking of this past weekend is, I throughout the week I agonize over my lineup. I'm always tweaking it and messing with it, and I'll bench someone and then put them back into the starting lineup. And you get to a point where you look at your lineup and you go, okay, this is a solid-looking lineup. And then in the other league that you and I are in, I scored like 65 points.
Yeah.
One of my lowest outputs ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fairly confident in that lineup. So
Yeah.
fantasy football drives me absolutely nuts sometimes. You have no idea what's going to happen until the players take to the field.
Yeah. It's a great source of stress.
Especially last night.
But it's a fun time. So good luck to everybody in week 4, and we will be back for week 4 recap and the first bye week. Can't wait. We'll see you next time.
See you.